So I don't mean to brag, but did you know that I could literally win multiple track events in the Olympics? At the very least, I could place in the top 8. I mean, I'd have to compete against women, but I could do it. Keeping on the topic of gender becoming subjective, let's talk about how athletes who have changed their gender are completely dominating in their respective sports on this episode of Jake in a Box Podcast. So good news, I got a new car. But even more exciting than that, we are 3 games in the NFL and the Lions still are undefeated. And like I predicted in the first episode of Jake in a Box Podcast, the Lions are going to the Super Bowl this year. We all know it. Every team knows it. The Lions are going to the Super Bowl, and I am so pumped. The Lions are totally going to the Super Bowl. It's great to be a Lions fan. It just feels so good to be optimistically desperate for victory.
I like it. I like starting each day with a sense of possibility. And I'm optimistic because every day I get a little more desperate, and desperate situations yield the quickest results.
We Lions fans are definitely desperate, so we're definitely going to get good results. All right, on to the topic for the day. I know I keep saying this, but I was going to move on after my last video to a new topic, but then stuff hit the news. I figured I would honor you with my humble opinion.
I think I am actually humble. I think I'm much more humble than you would understand.
So today's news is about biological men dominating in women's sports. As transgender men and women are transitioning into their new gender identity, it poses a serious question. Do they participate in men's sports or women's sports? Should it be based on their biological sex or their gender identity? Now, transgenders who compete in sports are commonly called transathletes. As you can see from this map here, whether or not transathletes are allowed to compete with their preferred gender varies from state to state. While most of the states on this map are green or yellow, allowing transathletes to compete with their preferred gender in most cases, there are also some states marked in red that require you to compete with your biological sex. Or at the very least, you have to have surgery and hormone therapy. But most of the states on here allow trans athletes to compete with their preferred gender. So let me give you a couple examples of this in the recent past. These are a bunch of trans athletes who competed with the gender that is different than their biological sex. It generated a lot of controversy because it was actually men playing like girls.
You play ball like a girl! What did you say? You heard me.
So first of all, there's Rachel McKinnon. That means she was born as a male but now identifies as a female. Rachel is a Canadian cyclist who won the championship last year and set the world record in the 200 meter for women. Both accomplishments were the first made by a transgender cyclist. So check out the video.
She's transgender, and last year she won a world championship for her age group, racing against women.
McKinnon takes it into world champion, oh Canada.
The world championship win was a little historic, and it's completely surreal that I'm that person. Like, I'm just some girl from Victoria, BC.
Rachel considers herself just another woman from Victoria, BC in Canada. And to a lot of people, she is just another woman. Not fundamentally different in any way. As another example, there's Terry Miller and Andrea Yearwood. Again, both Terry and Andrea are trans women, born males, now identifying as women. And they're both sprinters in track. I can definitely respect that. So they're competing in high school women's track in Connecticut. The two of them are consistently getting top 2 in their events. And they have set multiple records and won multiple championships. So again, check out the video.
Terry Miller and Andrea Yearwood dominating the competition at the Girls Track and Field Championships in Connecticut earlier this month. Coming in first and second place, respectively. And while it was a state race, their wins are making national headlines. Not because of what they did, but because of who they are, 2 transgender girls.
What do you want to say to other transgender youth, young people, teens who are out there really struggling through this process?
Just follow your heart. Like, don't let other people determine what you do in life.
Let's just play devil's advocate for a moment and just imagine that you were both born girls, and then all of a sudden you had 2 boys who identified as being girls, and they said, hey, we're going to be on your team, and maybe now you're not performing as well because they are better.
I'm not going to discourage you or try to say, oh, it's not fair. And it would just push me to run faster I'd be happy for them because they get to do what they want. They're happy, so then that should in turn make me happy.
And they're brave. They're just different from everybody.
That's right. They're brave. And if you're a girl competing against them, just run faster.
Run, Forrest, run!
All right, final example. Fallon Fox. So Fallon is the first transgender athlete in mixed martial arts. Again, Fallon is a trans woman competing in this very brutally physical sport. Just to give you an idea of how brutal this sport is, here's Fallon.
On top of it. Tries to drill that right hand. 1 minute 10 now remains in the second round. Downward elbow off her back from Alana Jones. Fan favourite reaction here for Fallon Fox as we take a look again at how she puts the knee across the throat of Alana Jones. Alana feels the pressure, can't breathe. Blood flow also.
And here's a famous fight between Fallon and Tamika Brents, and Fallon crushes Tamika Brents' skull. Take a look.
These girls are getting right into it. Fox taking the knees, and that's it. Fallon.
Now, I'm no mixed martial arts expert, but that's insane. Tamika even said in an interview after the match, "I've fought a lot of women and have never felt the strength that I felt in a fight as I did that night. I can't answer whether it's because she was born a man or not because I'm not a doctor. I can only say I've never felt so overpowered ever in my life, and I'm an abnormally strong woman in my own right. I still disagree with Fox fighting. Any other job or career, I say, have a go at it. But when it comes to combat sports, I think it just isn't fair." There are a lot more examples, but that's just to name a few of them. So we're back to the base question. Is it fair for trans women, again, biological men who identify as women, to compete in women's sports? Keep in mind that in every single one of these cases, a championship title was taken from a biological woman who otherwise would have won that championship. For example, if you ran track in high school, you know that only the top 2 go to states. And those who go to states are the ones who get to show off in front of college recruiters. Since Terry and Andrea got top 2 in their events, the number 3 and 4 girls who were biological girls didn't get to go when they otherwise would have gotten first and second place. These girls had mad skills and should have been good enough to make it to states. This could have literally cost them a college scholarship for track and field, or at the very least a chance to be on a college track team. Some people would say that's not really fair.
Life's not fair.
Of course, the argument on the other side is that, well, trans women are actually women and trans men are actually men, so none of this conversation is relevant anyways. So long story short, check out my last podcast about how just because you feel like a gender, that alone doesn't make you a different gender. It kind of takes away the meaning of what gender is. But that's not the point I want to go over in this video. Let's say for the sake of argument in this video that there really is an important distinction between biological sex and gender, just for the purposes of this video. So then what? So that changes the question a little bit. The words man and woman each have now 2 different meanings depending on if we're talking about biological sex or gender identity. And we need to make sure not to conflate the two if they really are 2 different things. So that means that our question really should be something more like, should separation in sports be about biological sex or should it be about gender identity? Because it's not the same thing, right?
Right.
Well, why were men and women separated in sports in the first place? Men and women have been separated in sports going all the way back to ancient Greece. I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for this, but it's not far from obvious to say that biological men have certain physical athletic advantages over women, and that allows them to be more competitive in most sports. And this has been recognized for thousands of years. To be 100% clear, I'm in no way saying that that means that men are superior to women or anything like that. That's not my point, so don't call me a sexist, because I'm not. I'm just acknowledging the fact that biological men and biological women have physical differences. So let me give you one perfect example. This sucker. So when I was in high school, I ran the 300 hurdles and the 400 meter dash. Yes, I'm going to get on my high horse for a quick second here. So I ran the 300 hurdles in 39.78 seconds, and I ran the 400 in 50.4 seconds. My coach just gave me this piece of a hurdle so that I could remember my times and the fact that I made it to states multiple times and that I had a couple championships. Now, I was competing against men, so I was definitely better than average, but I wasn't anywhere near Olympic levels, unless I competed against women. Now, women in the Olympics run the 400, just like I ran the 400, but in high school, we run the 300 hurdles, and women in the Olympics run the 400 hurdles. So I get this isn't exactly how it works, but if I had kept training after high school, and if you took my hurdle time and just extended it out from 300 to 400 meters, my 400 time would be 53.04 seconds. Potentially even faster if I had kept training during college. So let's compare that to the 2016 Olympic races in Rio. So first look on the left, the 400 meter hurdles. So again, if we had extended my time to 53.04 seconds, I would have literally won the 400 meter hurdles against the women. If you look on the right and compare the times to my 400 time, 50.4 seconds, that would have put me right at 5th place, less than a second away from the 400 meter gold medal. My point is that I was just a scrawny little high school boy, and I was competing at the Olympic level compared to women. All I had to do was identify as a woman, and I would have made it to the Olympics. Easily. Because I am speed.
I am speed.
And I'm not even the only person to make this point. So there's a British rapper that goes by the name Zuby. Zuby. It's such a weird name. And he just broke a women's weightlifting record while identifying as a woman. So again, let's check it out.
Male British rapper claims to have broken the women's weightlifting record while identifying as female. He was trying to highlight what he calls the absurdity of claims that there's no biological strength difference between men and women. Zuby's viral tweet got over 1 million views and comes amid a backlash against the growing number of athletes identifying as female in women's events. In his post, he outlined that he was identifying as a woman. We spoke to him.
I think the video went viral because it touched on a timely issue. According to their own logic, they have no proof that I myself did not identify as a woman whilst doing that video. So by their own logic, I could easily accuse them of being transphobic or being bigoted by claiming that I, in fact, was not a woman at the time that video was recorded.
Now, I totally get he's kind of sort of trolling, but he makes a good point. If we say that a biological woman is anybody who identifies as a woman, and if we base sports on your gender identity, not your biological sex, then he basically broke the women's world record. And even taking serious cases where there actually are biological men who identify as women, they will now be breaking records all over the place because they have certain biological advantages. And that's just a fact of life. And they've already been doing it. Sorry to keep going back to track and running, but just look at the world records real quick. If you compare any of the times from the men to the women, men always have the better record. Whether it's sprinting, long distance, jumping, throwing, in all these aspects, it's clear that the best of the men are better than the best of the women. And the physical differences that contribute to that are the reasons why men and women are separated in sports. It keeps it fair for each group. Now, one counter argument that I'll address briefly is this. Some will argue that men's physical advantages when they're identifying as women completely go away when they have surgery and take hormone therapy and things like that. Because it is, after all, reducing their testosterone levels, which is part of what makes men perform so well. The argument is that they are basically the same as biological women now, so the physical difference is irrelevant in their eyes. Fallon Fox, the trans woman who broke the skull of another woman in mixed martial arts, stated that the fact that she's a transgender puts her at more of a disadvantage than other women. Check it out.
So bottom line, being born male doesn't give you a physical advantage competing in female MMA?
No, not at all. After you take the testosterone, the hormone replacement therapy, and you remove that ability for the body to create large amounts of testosterone, especially being that I don't have even the amount of testosterone that women who were born with female anatomy have. I mean, yeah, I'm going to be like, I'm actually at a disadvantage.
But this completely neglects all the other physical differences that men have from women. It's not just about testosterone levels. And this is especially true for men who didn't transition until during or after puberty. There's at least like 2 or 3 advantages that men have over women, like longer arms, longer legs, larger hearts, larger lungs, taller bodies, bigger and stronger bones, smaller pelvis, less slanted femurs from the pelvis, larger muscles, and more easily built muscles.
Girl, look at that body. Girl, look at that body. Girl, look at that body. I work out.
And all these differences in physical attributes result in greater strength, speed, stamina, and things like that. Now, to be fair, women do have certain advantages too. They're a lot more flexible, they're generally smarter, and I'm sure there's more. I don't know, I can't really think of any others. I'm sure there are other differences. I promise I'm not sexist. I promise I respect women.
Nobody has more respect for women than I do. Nobody.
My point is just that reducing your testosterone levels doesn't totally affect your muscles, bones, lungs, and all those other sorts of things. It might overall reduce the athleticism of a man, but in general, it won't reduce it to the point where it's now comparable to an actual biological woman. So we have to ask, what was the original purpose to men and women being separated in sports? Was it based more on the differences between men and women in their biological sex or their gender identity? Keep in mind that until the past couple decades, this whole idea that gender identity was so different than biological sex didn't really exist. It's kind of a new concept. If for some reason the separation of men and women in sports was just for the sake of separating genders, then it makes perfect sense for trans athletes to compete with their preferred genders. In that case, I would totally agree with it. But in actuality, it was based on the biological differences between men and women. If we really did make it about gender identity, then keep in mind that there's more than just men and women. Should we separate sports into all of the different genders? In that case, we'd have to split it up dozens or even hundreds of times. Or what about people who are gender fluid and their gender changes over time? Or what about even people who are genderless? It really doesn't make much sense, and it really begs the question, why would we even be splitting it up by those genders anyways if it's just about how people identify themselves? I guess on the totally other extreme, we could just have no separation in sports. I mean, you'd kind of have the same problem where biological men are dominating in almost every sport, and that would unfortunately leave out a lot of women who are very good at what they do because they wouldn't be able to be competitive anymore. But honestly, if we're going to base all this on gender identity anyways, I feel like let's just throw all that out. That probably is the best option at that point.
Okay, I guess that makes sense.
Like I said, I really think a lot of this goes back to conflating gender identity and biological sex, which are supposed to be two separate things. Like I said in the last episode, it's really not that amazing that a man gave birth when it turns out it's just a biological woman. The act of giving birth has absolutely nothing to do with your gender identity. It's 100% based on your biological sex. In a very similar way, your athletic ability is a lot more closely tied to your biological sex than it is to your gender identity. So if we're going to base sports on one of them, it makes a lot more sense to base it on your biological sex. Kind of similar to how we separate a lot of sports based on ages. It makes it more fair for people of different age groups to compete with their same age group, so that you don't have 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds completely dominating in most sports. That would completely leave out other groups. We have this separation so that it can be fair for everybody. Basing it off biological sex is not too much different than that. It just doesn't make any sense to base it off of gender identity, since that isn't really tied to athletic ability in any way. Okay, just one last thing I'll say before I wrap up. To all you sophisticated radical feminists out there.
Now, a more sophisticated radical feminist.
Are you feminists okay with biological men taking over women's sports? I know that feminists and LGBTQ activists are supposed to be on the same page, but your ideologies are kind of at odds here. As a feminist, are you okay with men dominating in both women's and men's sports? As feminists, are you okay with men stealing championship titles from women who deserve it? As feminists, are you okay with biological men beating up women to the point of breaking their skulls because we're not acknowledging the physical differences they have even in mixed martial arts? I just honestly kind of wonder why sophisticated radical feminists,
Now, a more sophisticated radical feminist.
why they aren't more openly opposed to this kind of stuff. But I guess I'm not sophisticated enough for that. Okay, that's all I got for today. As always, if you've got topic ideas or want to respond to something in this video, you can always email me at jakeinaboxpodcast@gmail.com. But in the meantime, I'm going to watch the Lions dominate this weekend in the NFL. So have a good night and stay classy. Hey, hope you liked the show on Jake in a Box Podcast. If you like this episode, make sure you click the subscribe button below so that you never miss another video of Jake in a Box Podcasts.